The coffee machine hissed in the corner of my apartment, a faint plume of steam curling upward like a ghost I couldn't quite catch. I stood by the counter, my fingers tracing the chipped edge of a mug, blue, with a faded sailboat etched into the ceramic. It was the kind of morning where the city outside my window felt too loud, too fast, the honks and sirens weaving into a rhythm I'd learned to ignore. But inside there was a stillness I clung to, a fragile sense of order in the way I arranged my days. My name is Julia, and I'd built a life that felt like a carefully balanced stack of books. One wrong move, and it could all topple. I glanced at my phone, the screen glowing with a calendar packed tight. Meetings, deadlines, a presentation I'd been tweaking for weeks. My job at the marketing firm was a treadmill set to sprint, exhilarating, relentless, and mine. I'd worked years to get here, to carve out a space where I could stand steady, where the ground didn't shift beneath me. The promotion I was chasing felt like the final piece of a puzzle, a way to lock in the security I'd been chasing since I was a kid watching my parents argue over bills. But lately there was a tug at the edges of my thoughts, a whisper I couldn't quite name. It wasn't doubt, not exactly, just a feeling that something was slipping through my fingers, no matter how tightly I gripped. The mug warmed my palms as I sipped, the coffee bitter and sharp, grounding me. I crossed to the window, my socks scuffing softly against the hardwood. Outside, the city pulsed, people hurrying, lights flickering, a street vendor's call slicing through the air. I loved it, this chaos I'd made my home, but sometimes it felt like I was running just to stay in place. My reflection stared back from the glass, faint and ghostly. Dark hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes a little too tired for 8 a.m. I pressed my forehead to the cool pane, letting the sensation anchor me. This was my life, solid and mine, and I wasn't about to let it unravel. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Sarah, my best friend since college. * lunch today? Need to vent. * I smiled, my thumb hovering over the reply. Sarah was the opposite of me. Spontaneous, always chasing some new dream, her life a kaleidoscope of half-finished plans. I envied her sometimes, the way she moved through the world like nothing could hold her down. But I liked my roots, my routines, the way I could predict tomorrow. I typed back, 1 p.m., usual spot, and set the phone down, my chest loosening just a fraction. Sarah's chaos balanced my order, and I needed that today. I slipped into my coat, the wool soft against my skin, and grabbed my bag. The apartment door clicked shut behind me, a sound that always felt like a promise. I'd be back, everything in its place. But as I stepped into the elevator, the mirrored walls throwing back a dozen versions of myself, that whisper returned. It was in the way my shoulders tensed, the way my fingers curled too tightly around my bag's strap. Something was coming, something I couldn't plan for, and no amount of coffee or calendars could keep it at bay. The days blurred into weeks, each one a carefully choreographed dance of emails, meetings, and late-night revisions. My apartment became a revolving door of takeout containers and half-read books, the sailboat mug my only constant companion. I liked it this way, busy, purposeful, every step calculated to keep me on track. I believed I had it all figured out. The promotion was close, my routine was ironclad, and the city's hum was my heartbeat. But life, I was starting to learn, has a gentle way of shifting your perspective when you least expect it. Eric and I had been together for 3 years, our lives orbiting each other in a comfortable rhythm. He was a graphic designer, his world one of late-night sketches and sudden bursts of inspiration, while mine was spreadsheets and deadlines. We'd found a balance, or so I thought, dinners when we could, texts to bridge the gaps, and an unspoken agreement that our ambitions came first. Neither of us felt pressure, and I appreciated having space to grow individually. Our apartment, a cozy loft with exposed brick and 2 small windows, held the evidence of our separate lives. His easel in one corner, my laptop on the dining table, a silent negotiation of space and time. That evening, I sat cross-legged on the couch, a glass of wine in hand, the city's glow filtering through the blinds. My laptop was open, a presentation slide glaring back at me, but my mind wandered. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the building settling. I traced the rim of my glass, the cool edge grounding me, and wondered when I'd last felt truly still. Not the calm of a packed schedule, but something deeper, something I couldn't name. My fingers paused, and I caught my reflection in the dark window. Eyes shadowed, lips pressed tight, like I was holding my breath without realizing it. The lock clicked, and Eric stepped inside, his jacket slung over one shoulder. I glanced at the clock, 7:30 p.m. Early for him, Usually, he'd stumble in closer to 10, paint smudged on his knuckles, a tired grin masking his exhaustion. Tonight, though, his steps were lighter, his hair still damp from a quick shower at the studio. He dropped his bag by the door, the thud soft but deliberate, and crossed to the kitchen without a word. I watched him, my wineglass forgotten, as he pulled a beer from the fridge, the bottle clinking against the shelf. "Hey," I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be. "You're home early." He popped the cap off, the hiss sharp in the quiet, and leaned against the counter. "Yeah," he said, his eyes catching mine for a moment before drifting to the floor. "Figured I'd call it a day." His tone was casual, but there was a weight to it, like he was testing the words before letting them settle. I nodded, my fingers curling into the couch cushion. "Good call. You've been burning out lately." The words felt automatic, a reflex to fill the space, but they hung there, heavier than I intended. Eric's jaw tightened just a fraction, and he took a slow sip, his throat working as he swallowed. I wanted to ask more, to peel back the layers of his silence, but something stopped me. A flicker of unease, like I was stepping onto unfamiliar ground. He crossed to the couch and sank down beside me, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar of his cologne, mixed with something sharper, like turpentine. His knee brushed mine, a small anchor in the quiet, and I shifted to face him. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might break whatever was forming between us. Eric's fingers tapped the bottle, a restless rhythm, and he tilted his head back, eyes tracing the ceiling. "Yeah," he said again, but this time it sounded less certain, like a question he was asking himself. "Just thinking, I guess. About work. About us." He paused, his gaze flicking to me, and I felt my pulse quicken, a sudden heat blooming in my chest. "Us," I echoed, my throat dry. The word felt fragile, like a crack in the foundation I'd thought was solid. I set my glass on the table, the clink too loud, and folded my hands in my lap to keep them still. "What about us?" He exhaled a slow, uneven sound, and ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Jules. I've been at the studio non-stop, chasing deadlines, and it hit me today. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be here. With you." His voice cracked on the last word, and he looked away, his jaw tight again, like he was bracing for something. I blinked, my mind scrambling to catch up. Eric wasn't one for grand declarations. He showed love in quiet ways. A coffee left on my desk, a playlist shared without comment. This felt different, raw, like he was peeling back a layer I hadn't known was there. My fingers twisted together, the skin warm and clammy, and I leaned forward, searching his face. "You're here now," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "That's what matters, right?" He met my eyes, and for a moment the room felt smaller, the air thicker, like we were the only two people in the world. "Is it?" he asked, his voice low, almost a challenge. "Because sometimes I wonder if we're just going through the motions. You with your job, me with mine. When was the last time we really talked? Not about schedules or bills, but us." His words landed like stones in still water, rippling through me. I opened my mouth to argue, to say we were fine, that this was just life, busy, messy, but ours. But the truth caught in my throat, sharp and unyielding. I thought of the nights I'd fallen asleep alone, the mornings we'd traded nothing but quick kisses before rushing out. I'd called it balance, independence, but now it felt like distance, a gap I hadn't noticed until it was too wide to ignore. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely audible. My hands unclenched, fingers trembling as I reached for his. His palm was warm, rough from charcoal and paint, and I held on, anchoring myself. "But you're here now, Eric. That's a start." He nodded, his thumb brushing over my knuckles, a small, deliberate motion that felt like a promise. Outside, the city hummed on, oblivious, but inside something shifted. A quiet change, subtle but undeniable. I didn't have it all figured out anymore, and for the first time, that didn't scare me. It felt like possibility, like the first crack of dawn after a long night. The air in the apartment felt different that week, heavier somehow, like it was holding its breath. I stood at the kitchen counter, my fingers brushing the edge of a grocery list I'd scribbled on a napkin. Tomatoes, basil, a good bottle of red. The ink smudged under my thumb, blurring the words, and I frowned, my chest tightening for no reason I could name. It was Thursday, and Eric had texted earlier, his message simple but deliberate. *, let's make dinner tonight. Just us. *, I'd stared at the screen too long, my pulse skipping, before replying with a quick sounds perfect. Now the clock ticked toward 7, and the quiet was louder than the city outside. I glanced at the stove, its burners cold and untouched, and felt a flicker of unease. Cooking wasn't our thing, not together anyway. My meals were quick salads thrown together after late nights at the office, and Eric survived on takeout and coffee when he was deep in a project. But lately, he'd been different, thoughtful in a way that caught me off guard, like he was piecing together something I couldn't yet see. Last weekend, he'd brought home a loaf of sourdough from the bakery down the street, setting it on the counter with a shy grin, like it was a gift. I'd laughed, teasing him about going domestic, but the warmth in his eyes had stayed with me, lingering like the scent of fresh bread. The door clicked open and Eric stepped inside, a canvas tote slung over his shoulder. His hair was mussed, a streak of charcoal dusting his temple, and his jacket smelled faintly of the autumn chill outside. He paused in the doorway, his gaze finding mine, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The tote hit the floor with a soft thud, and he crossed to the counter, unpacking groceries with a focus that felt almost reverent. Garlic, a block of Parmesan, a bundle of rosemary tied with twine. Each item landed with a quiet purpose, and I watched, my hands still, as the napkin list came to life. "You went all out," I said, my voice lighter than I felt. I leaned against the counter, my hip brushing the cool granite, and tried to ignore the way my fingers twitched, wanting to reach for something. My phone, a pen, anything to steady me. "What's the occasion?" Eric's hands paused, a jar of olive oil glinting under the kitchen light. He looked at me, his eyes soft but searching, like he was weighing his words. "No occasion," he said, his voice low, steady. "Just felt like it. Felt like us." He turned back to the groceries, but his shoulders stayed tense, as if he'd said more than he meant to. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, and reached for the rosemary, my fingers brushing the rough leaves. The scent hit me, sharp, earthy, like a memory of somewhere I'd never been. "Okay," I said, forcing a smile. "Let's do this then. What's the plan?" He grinned, a small, crooked thing that made my chest ache, and pulled a cutting board from the drawer. "Pasta from scratch," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "Nothing fancy, just good. You in?" I hesitated, my gaze flicking to my laptop on the table, its screen dark but looming. A report was due tomorrow, and I'd promised myself I'd finish it tonight. But Eric was already rinsing tomatoes, his movements sure and unhurried, and the kitchen felt warmer, smaller, like it was drawing us closer. "I'm in," I said, the words softer than I expected, and I stepped beside him, my shoulder brushing his. We worked in a rhythm that felt new yet familiar, like a song we'd forgotten the words to. I chopped garlic, the knife's steady thump grounding me, while Eric kneaded dough, his knuckles dusted with flour. The room filled with small sounds, water simmering, oil sizzling, our breaths sinking without effort. I stole glances at him, catching the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the way his fingers paused to tuck a strand of hair behind his ear. He was here, fully here, and it struck me how rare that had become. How we'd let our lives pull us apart, orbiting but never colliding. "Remember that time we tried to cook?" I said, breaking the quiet. My voice felt too loud, but I pushed on, needing to fill the space. "Back in your old place, with that tiny stove? We burned the sauce, and the smoke alarm wouldn't shut up." Eric laughed, a low rumble that warmed the air. "Yeah," he said, his eyes crinkling. "You kept waving a towel at it, yelling like it was personal." He glanced at me, his grin fading into something softer. "Feels like forever ago." "It does," I said, my hands stilling on the knife. The memory hung between us, sharp and sweet, and I felt that tug again, that whisper of something slipping, something I wasn't ready to lose. I looked down, focusing on the garlic, its papery skin curling under my fingers. We were different then. He didn't answer right away, and the silence stretched, heavy with unspoken things. The dough rested under a cloth, the pot hissed softly, and outside, a siren wailed, distant but piercing. Finally he spoke, his voice so quiet I almost missed it. "Are we that different now?" My breath caught, and I looked up, meeting his gaze. His eyes were steady, but there was a flicker in them. Hope, maybe, or fear. I wanted to say no, to insist we were still us, still solid, but the words stuck. Instead, I saw the nights we'd spent apart, the mornings rushed and wordless, the way I'd clung to my routine like a lifeline. I saw him, too, his late nights at the studio, his sketches piling up, his silence growing louder than his words. We hadn't changed, not really, but we'd drifted, and the distance felt like a fault line, waiting to crack. "I don't know," I said, my voice raw. My fingers tightened around the knife handle, the wood biting into my palm. "Maybe we are. Maybe that's the problem." Eric's hands stopped, the dough forgotten, and he turned to face me fully. The kitchen light cast shadows across his face, sharpening the lines of his jaw, the curve of his mouth. Jules, he said, and the way he said my name, soft, deliberate, made my chest tighten. I don't want to lose this. Lose us. I know I've been gone in my head, in my work. But I'm here now. I want to be here. His words hit like a gust of wind, stealing my breath. I set the knife down, the clatter too loud, and pressed my hands to the counter, kneading the solid weight beneath me. Then why does it feel like we're slipping? I asked, my voice trembling despite myself. You're planning dinners, buying rosemary, acting like everything's fine, but I can't shake this feeling that we're pretending. Like we're trying to glue something that's already broken. He flinched, just barely, but I saw it. The way his shoulders stiffened, the way his fingers curled into fists. I'm not pretending, he said, his voice low but firm. I'm trying, Julia. I see you, running yourself ragged, chasing that promotion, holding everything so tight. And I've let you, because I thought that's what you wanted. But I miss you. I miss us. The room spun, the air too thick, too warm. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that I was fine, that we were fine. But my throat burned and my eyes stung, and all I could do was stare at the counter, at the scattered tomato seeds and flour dust, like evidence of something we'd tried to build. I miss us too, I whispered, and the admission felt like a crack splitting open, raw and unstoppable. But I don't know how to fix it, Eric. I don't know if we can. He stepped closer, his hand hovering near mine, not quite touching. We don't have to fix it all tonight, he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in it. But we can start. This. He gestured to the counter, the groceries, the simmering pot. This is me starting. I want more nights like this. Not just dinner, but you. Us. Together. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the Eric I'd fallen for. The one who left notes in my books, who laughed too loud at bad movies, who saw me even when I hid from myself. But I saw the distance too, the months we'd let slip by, the quiet changes that had carved space between us. My fingers brushed his, tentative, and I felt the warmth of his skin, the pulse beneath it. Okay, I said, my voice barely a breath. Let's start. The pot boiled over, a soft hiss breaking the moment, and Eric cursed under his breath, lunging for the stove. I laughed, the sound shaky but real, and grabbed a spoon, stirring the sauce as he adjusted the flame. We moved together again, clumsy but trying, and the kitchen filled with the scent of garlic and rosemary, wrapping us in something fragile but hopeful. Outside the city roared on, but in here it was just us, two people, a counter full of groceries, and a quiet change that felt like the start of something true. The weeks that followed felt like a slow exhale, the kind you don't realize you've been holding until your chest finally loosens. I stood by the window in our apartment, the glass cool against my fingertips, watching the city's evening lights flicker to life. The hum of traffic was a distant murmur, softer now, as if the world outside had learned to match the rhythm inside. My reflection stared back, pale but steady, the lines of my face softer than they'd been in months. I adjusted the scarf around my neck, its wool rough but warm, and turned away, my socks whispering against the hardwood. The kitchen counter was still scattered with traces of last night's dinner. A wooden spoon resting on a cutting board, a half-empty bottle of red wine catching the light. Eric had insisted on making risotto, his hands steady as he stirred, the steam rising in delicate curls. I'd watched him, my laptop closed for once, the weight of deadlines fading into something I could carry instead of letting it crush me. Neither of us had spoken much, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was a shared breath, a space where we didn't need to rush or explain. For the first time in too long, I felt no pressure, no tug of expectation pulling us apart. I appreciated that space, the way it let me grow without feeling like I was losing him. He was in the living room now, his sketchbook open on the coffee table, pencil moving in quick, sure strokes. I leaned against the doorway, watching the way his brow furrowed, the way his fingers smudged charcoal across the page. There was a calm to him now, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. It wasn't the frantic energy of deadlines or the weight of unspoken doubts. It was something deeper, like he'd found a center I was only just beginning to understand. The room smelled faintly of cedar and ink, grounding me, and I crossed to the couch, sinking into its familiar sagging cushions. Hey, I said, my voice soft, almost tentative. He glanced up, his eyes catching mine, and smiled, a slow, crooked thing that made my chest tighten in the best way. What are you working on? He set the pencil down, the tip leaving a faint mark on the paper, and leaned back, stretching his arms overhead. Nothing big, he said, his tone easy, like the words weren't carrying the weight they once would have. Just sketching. Clears my head. His gaze lingered on me, warm but searching, and he patted the spot next to him. Come here. I hesitated, my fingers twisting the edge of my scarf, but then I moved, settling beside him. The couch dipped under our weight, and his arm brushed mine, the contact light but deliberate. I studied the sketchbook, vague shapes, a city skyline, a figure that might have been me, standing by a window. My breath caught, and I looked at him, my heart thudding. Is that? Maybe, he said, his voice low, a hint of teasing in it. But his eyes were serious, and he reached for my hand, his thumb tracing the ridge of my knuckles. I've been thinking a lot, Jules. About us. About what we want. The words hung in the air, fragile but steady, and I felt my pulse quicken. I wanted to pull away, to retreat into the safety of my routines, but something in his voice, calm, certain, held me there. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, my fingers tightening around his. He exhaled a slow, measured sound, and shifted to face me fully. The light from the lamp cast shadows across his face, highlighting the stubble on his jaw, the faint lines around his eyes. I mean, he said, I don't want us to keep drifting. But I also don't want to force it. You've been chasing your dreams and I've been chasing mine, and that's okay. It's more than okay, it's us. Neither of us felt pressure before, and I don't want that to change. But I want to make sure we're still here. Together. His words sank in, warm and steady, like sunlight breaking through clouds. I thought of the nights I'd spent alone, the mornings I'd rushed out, the way I'd clung to my job like it was the only thing keeping me afloat. But I thought of this too, the dinners, the sketches, the quiet moments where we found each other again. I appreciated the space to grow, to chase my promotion, to build the stability I'd always craved. And yet here he was, not asking me to choose, but asking me to stay. I've been thinking too, I said, my voice steadier now, though my throat still burned. About what matters. About us. I pulled my hand back, not to withdraw, but to gesture at the room. The books piled on the shelf, the easel in the corner, the sailboat mug on the counter. This. All of this. It's not perfect, but it's ours. And I don't want to lose it. Eric's eyes softened, and he nodded, his hand finding mine again, his grip firm but gentle. Then let's keep it, he said. Not by holding on too tight, but by letting it breathe. You grow, I grow, and we figure out the rest together. The simplicity of it hit me, a quiet revelation that felt like a weight lifting. Personal growth and stability could coexist with relational changes. I saw that now, in the way he looked at me, in the way the apartment felt like home again, not just a place to crash. I leaned into him, my head resting on his shoulder, and felt the steady rise and fall of his breath. Outside the city hummed, but inside there was only us, two people, a sketchbook, and a future we were starting to ask questions about. We sat like that for a while, the clock ticking softly on the mantel, its rhythm steady and sure. The lamp's glow warmed the room, and I closed my eyes, letting the moment sink in. There were still uncertainties, my promotion, his next project, the million small decisions that made up a life. But for now there was this, no pressure, no rush, just the potential for rediscovery and hope. When I finally pulled back, the night had deepened, the city lights twinkling like stars against the dark. Eric's hand lingered on mine, his thumb still tracing those small, deliberate circles, and I knew we weren't done growing, not by a long shot. But we were here, together, and that felt like enough. I stood, stretching my arms overhead, and crossed to the window again. The glass was cool against my palm, the city sprawling beneath me, alive and endless. Behind me, I heard Eric's pencil resume its quiet scratch, and I smiled, a small, private thing. We'd find our way, I thought, not by forcing or fixing, but by letting the quiet changes lead us back to what truly mattered. As I stood there, the city's pulse a faint echo against the glass, I felt the weight of the past months settle into something softer, like a tide pulling back to reveal the shore. Eric's pencil scratched on, a quiet promise in the stillness, and I turned to glance at him. His head bent, his hand steady, sketching a world we were still building. That moment, I finally understood. Love wasn't about clinging to what we'd been or rushing toward what we might become. It was this, the gentle rhythm of showing up, of growing side by side, trusting the roots we'd planted to hold us through the seasons yet to come.